you're all doing well, guys, and thank you for joining us a bit late in the day. We might have a few more people joining, but we do have quite a bit of information to give to you, so we will get started. We'll start by welcoming you to this information session of the British Conference for Undergraduate Research 2026. My name is Dr. Alessio Vecino, and I'm here with my colleagues, Dr. Mona O'Brien and Dr. Robin Calvert. We are part of the Student Learning Development team at the University of Glasgow, who is supporting the kind of training for this year's British Conference of Undergraduate Research. If you are not from the University of Glasgow, just know that this year's conference will happen in Glasgow, as you will learn in a second. So, first things first, let's see if my slides want to move. There you go. Things that we'll be covering today include what actually is BCUR. Let's give you a bit of an introduction to the conference and who can apply, so the eligibility criteria. But for most of the session, we'll be talking about the actual process of applying to the conference and the abstract writing, trying to give you some tips and some guidance on how can you do that in the best possible way to be successful in your application. Hopefully, we will manage to do this just enough time to have time at the end for some questions from you. So if you have any questions regarding your submission or what you're planning to do, you will have time to do that. The first thing to say is, like, what is BCUR? BCUR is a multidisciplinary undergraduate research conference, right? This is the kind of like subheading of what BCUR is, but we want to break this down a little bit to try and see exactly what each of these terms mean. So what do we mean by multidisciplinary? It means that we welcome presentations, we welcome submissions, posters, creative submissions from all subjects and disciplines, right? We will talk about this more later, but it's an all-inclusive kind of like conference. We just want to receive like submissions from all corners of undergraduate study, right? We are not discriminating by subject in any way. Undergraduate, this is self-explanatory, hopefully, but we have the submissions open to all undergraduate students, right? One condition that you need to meet is to be an undergraduate student in order to apply for this conference. Again, we will be talking about a couple of specific cases that might be a little bit of like gray areas, but we want to clarify them as well. But in general, all undergraduates are welcome to apply for the conference. Research. We are looking for original investigations and findings. What do we mean by these exactly? Do you need to be submitting abstracts that are kind of like groundbreaking interventions into your field that are going to change your discipline? No, right? We understand that you guys are undergraduates at this stage. What we mean by original investigations and findings is that we want to see pieces of work that are the product of your own perspective, your own thought, your own analysis, and your own evaluation of the subject that you have chosen to study, right? That are not just kind of like repeating what somebody else has said on a topic, but has that element of analysis or evaluation that comes from your own perspective. That's what we mean by original. And finally, it's a conference. And this means that you will be presenting whatever you submit and is accepted to an audience of other peers, other students from across the UK, and also staff who are all very, very excited to see what you have to say. So, key details to remember. I've already said that the conference this year takes place here at the University of Glasgow. The dates in which a conference will take place are the 1st and 2nd of April in 2026. And you only need to make sure to apply that you are eligible. As I said, being eligible to apply means that you need to be a current undergraduate, or you should have graduated within the past year. If you graduated as an undergraduate within the last year, you are also eligible to apply. And also make sure that the research that you're presenting is research that you conducted during your undergraduate studies. If you have questions about, there might be like gray cases here about, we've had some questions of people that I started this research before I started my undergraduate studies, but then developed it more during my undergraduate studies. Can I still submit that? We can talk about this. Most of the answers will be yes, as long as you've worked on that research during your undergraduate studies, this will be completely fine. There's quite a lot more detail on what the conference is, the history of the conference, how to apply. We'll be covering a lot of these things, but if you want all the information in one place, you can scan the QR code to go to our website. This is where all the information live. And I would suggest that you bookmark that website in your browsers to make sure it's easily accessible for you. And I will now pass the mic to my colleague, Mona, who will talk to you about preparing your abstract.
Thank you so much, Alesh. So Alesh is very kindly doing the slides, so I'll ask Alesh to please move us to the next slide. So before we think more about the abstracts, I'm just going to go very briefly over the submission types that are available for BCUR and BCUR 2026. So I'll just give a really brief outline of these. There's more detail on all of these on the website, and if you have questions about any of these, we'll be very happy to answer them in the question and answer portion of today's session as well. So first and foremost, we have our oral presentations. That's your kind of standard conference presentation. So that's a 10-minute presentation. It's a 10-minute presentation, and then you'll have 5 minutes for questions. You can use slides, but slides are not compulsory if you prefer to present without them. Second format of submission that is available is posters. So in this case, you will design and create your poster. These will be displayed in one of our nice spaces at the university, and there will be particular times where you would be expected to be present with your poster, and then people can circulate and come have discussions with you. They'll see your poster and they'll say, oh, that looks exciting, and they'll come over and talk to you and ask you further questions about the research that you're presenting on the poster. And then the third and final type of submission that we have for BCUR 26 is a creative submission. So again, these would be 10 minutes long, and you would have 5 minutes for questions at the end. And creative submission is a very broad category. So if I list something that you're thinking of, or if I don't list something that you're thinking of, again, you can ask us. But examples of creative submissions would be things like if you wanted to present your creative writing, if you've created a piece of music or dance, if you have an artwork that you've created that you want to discuss. It might be a short film that you've made in your program of studies. It might be an excerpt from a play that you've written as part of your studies. And for these as well, the presentation can be live. So if you bring an instrument or something, you can come and play the music there. Or if it was maybe something like a play that had like very specific staging, you could show a recording of an excerpt, a 10-minute excerpt, for example, from the performance, and then be there to discuss it and answer the questions in the question portion. And for all of these submission types, you will be required to write an abstract to tell us what you're proposing for the conference. So we'll go to the next slide. So in terms of when you go into the submission portal, which is linked on the website, and I'll put the link for I'm sure you've probably all seen the website, but I'll put the link for that in the chat at the end of the meeting. But in terms of the key elements of your submission, these are the most important things that you will be asked for. The first thing will be the full title of your submission. And remember, there's a maximum of 20 words, so you might need to edit it to meet that word requirement if you have a very long title in mind at the moment. The title can be as exciting or as descriptive as you want. Sometimes quite a descriptive title can be really useful because it just tells people exactly what the presentation is about, from the very beginning. So we certainly won't be judging on exciting or not exciting. I don't write very exciting titles for anything, so don't worry about that, but just make sure you give a nice clear title. Next thing, which Robin is going to talk to you in much more detail about in a moment, is the abstract. Remember that the abstract has a word limit of 250 words. If you try and put in more than that, the system won't accept it. So remember that that word count is in play. Other things we will ask for is obviously your name as the author, or if there's more than one presenter or researcher involved, we'll ask for all of the names. And we'll ask for your affiliation. And that's just the university where you're studying or where you conducted the research that you're presenting on. We'll also ask you for a few keywords. These are just the main things that your presentation is about. This is just to help filter and organize the submissions. So just kind of what are the main things? If it was a presentation about the solar corona, probably like sun or solar would be one of your keywords, for example. So they're not anything that you'll be evaluated on. That's just for sorting, and it's really useful. So we appreciate it. And you'll be asked to select, of course, what presentation format. So one of the three that I just spoke to you about. And just one important thing to note is with the Oxford abstract system that you'll submit to the conference with, remember that you will, once you've completed your submission, once it's all properly finished and you've clicked complete, you should get an email to say that you have finished the submission, that it's been taken in for consideration. If you don't get an email, you might need to try the submission again. If an issue persists, there's a contact email on the website where you can contact the BCUR team and say, I'm trying to submit and there's an issue. But just make sure that you get that confirmation email at the end of your submission. We'll go to the next slide. So just to hear a little bit more of your thoughts before we get into the finer points of abstract writing for BCUR, we would like to hear, what do you think? And if you can type your answers in the chat, that would be perfect. What is the point of an abstract? Why do conferences ask for abstracts? And if you've never thought about this before, I don't know is a valid answer. Great. So Trinity saying a summary of the work submitted. Yes, absolutely. Very good. Someone called iPhone2 saying to briefly summarize the topic of discussion and allow the reader to get the main idea. Yes, excellent. So really drawing out these important ideas of summary, which Robin is going to build on with you. Brilliant. Fatima saying about identifying your key points. Yeah, that's something Robin will definitely be talking to you about. Kinza, a general summary of work, of what the researcher was on, and a good way for others to search for relevant research. Yeah, so helping people to select what they might be interested in. That's a really important point. Yeah, Sunny building on that and talking about attracting an audience. And Michael also saying, seeing about are they relevant, are they appropriate, both for the panel who will review them and then the people who attend the conference. So fantastic. Thank you all so much for your excellent and very accurate contributions. We'll go to the next slide. And this essentially just says what you've already pinned down so nicely. They're really important. These are really important in terms of informing the selection of conference presentations. So this is how we select. This is how most conferences select the presentations, is through abstracts. And then also on the day, there'll be a nice program of the talks. We'll probably use a digital program for BCUR 26. People will be able to look and see what are they interested in, what are they excited about, maybe things that overlap with their research or new and exciting things that they want to hear about at BCUR. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Robin, who's going to talk to you more about abstracts.
Thank you. I really liked what you guys were saying in the chat there about abstracts. You've got a real sense of it. It sounds like a lot of you have written them before, which you probably have. You've been maybe asked to write them as part of an assignment, particularly maybe if you're a final year student, you're being asked to write them even right now as part of your dissertation processes. And you're absolutely right. An abstract is really just a summary of your research and your work. And I'm going to tell you a really horrific secret about us academics, particularly those of us in the arts around the table. Sometimes we write abstracts for research we haven't even done yet, and we stick them into conference presentations and submissions, and then we get excited when it gets actually accepted, and then we go, oh, we better go write that paper now. And you know what? That's actually kind of valid. It's probably not the best idea for you guys here. We are asking you to write an abstract, maybe on some research you've already done, but you might have an idea or work in progress or something you're working on right now. And this gives you a good opportunity to kind of spend some time on it. And that's perfectly okay, because an abstract really is just a summary of an idea about research. I like what Sunny said too about the idea that it's attracting the audience, because you will use these later on as well. It becomes part of the conference program. It shows what you're going to be talking about. So what are the essential components then that go into that? First of all, clearly you have to say, what is your central argument or aim or research question? What is the key idea that you are going to be talking about? Secondly, it talks about what you did. What was your method? How did you do your research? How did you go about it? It gives you a little bit of a hint on what your key findings or your anticipated outcomes or your results or your conclusions are, okay? But it doesn't give everything away. It just kind of hints at that. And perhaps, maybe most importantly, why does this research matter? Why is it significant? Why should we care about it? Now, Alish said at the beginning, this does not have to be world-changing, earth-shattering, original, unique contribution to knowledge, okay? So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to show that this matters because actually I'm curing cancer. That's not it. It's just like, why is this particular thing that you're talking about a contribution to the larger conversation? It can be quite simple. What does it build on? How does it connect to kind of a bigger picture? Okay. So thinking about that, let's look at some examples of some abstracts. So thanks, Alish. We can go on. So one thing I don't know if we mentioned at the beginning, Alish, Mona, and I work on a conference here at the University of Glasgow called Let's Talk About X. And it's an annual undergraduate multidisciplinary. It's like a micro version of this big BCUR conference. And that's why we got involved in this one. So this year, instead of running Let's Talk About X, we're helping out with this big conference and excited to welcome people from all over. The reason I'm mentioning that is the two examples that we've used are actually abstracts that students submitted to our conference just that we had earlier this year in March. So an abstract, first of all, as I've said, what is your central research question or argument? You want to clearly articulate the central aim of your research, talk about why it matters very briefly, and give us some relevant context, okay? I'm not going to read through every detail of this, but you can see this was all of the papers are just fantastic and interesting. And this was a really interesting piece of research by a fifth year, still an undergraduate, it's just a longer program, immunology student. So this is a student who's maybe had quite a bit of research experience in their undergraduate career so far. Great topic. And you can see that they've given us a really interesting hook in the title, right? The gut, brain, and mind. Can we treat inflammatory bowel disease with antidepressants and psychedelics? That's a paper I'd want to go be interested in hearing more about for sure. So they start out telling us what IBD is, how it affects people. So that gives us right off the bat, oh, this sounds like it's an important topic. They talk more commonly about how it's known. So they actually also put it in language that maybe someone like myself, an art historian, can easily understand. They talk about what happens to people with IBD, what the current state of the research is, current treatments, etc., the gut-brain axis, and then you can see I've highlighted here. This research investigates the signaling pathways across the GBA, which they've already defined for us, just there, gut-brain axis again, right above it, across the GBA, primarily exploring how the altered microbiota and neuroinflammation in IBD might be linked by serotonin signaling, period, end of. Brilliant little pithy, very clearly says what this research is about. Additionally, I propose how current serotonin targeting drugs, such as antidepressants and psychedelics, might be used to treat IBD. Overall, this research highlights serotonergic signaling as a bridge between the gut brain and novel therapeutic target for IBD. So tells us very, very clearly what it's going to do, that little hint of a conclusion. But there's still so much information to come in the paper as it's delivered, but it gives a really nice, clear, concise picture of what the research is about, how it links to a bigger problem, and what they're going to talk about. And it's done in really beautiful academic language that is appropriate, but also understandable but for a wider audience. That's the kind of thing that we're kind of looking for with this. Let's look at another example, possibly in a discipline that I can read a little more clearly because it's about cinema. Okay. And this one maybe talks a little bit more about that methodology, how you go about your research. And so this is the thing, we're all from different disciplines here. Okay. So I've just given you a science example. That doesn't necessarily work for an art historian like me, or historian like Mona, or a lit person like Alish, or any of you out there. I saw some history out there. Equally, this kind of approach wouldn't necessarily work for the sciences. So do what's appropriate for your discipline. So but overall, all abstracts still do the same kind of set of material. So like we just said, you set up your topic, you set up your title. Now, this one shows us a little bit more about how you did your research. What method did you use? What theories did you use? What sources did you use? So this one, this is actually a fairly straightforward title, but it still has a nice hook. The Feminine Imagination in Post-War Cinema. Very clearly, I know what it's about. And then wonderful opening sentence on this one. Often dismissed as dated and histrionic, the classic melodrama genre, born in Hollywood in the shadow of the Second World War, is in fact a valuable moment in field of history. Gives us context, sets the tone, tells us that this is an important subject. So again, I'm not going to read through all the details, but it discusses the context and the problems of the literature in this field right now. So this second paragraph shows us that method. Through a multidisciplinary approach, incorporating historical analysis, gender studies, and psychoanalysis, so she's telling us the theories that she's covering here, I will examine 3 pertinent examples of the classic melodrama genre, which heavily involved women in their production. Now she's telling us the sources. Now Voyager, 1942, The Seventh Veil, and All That Heaven Allows. So that should be italics, actually, alongside reference to others. And then, what's the method? I will place these films in their relevant historical context and analyze their content through a feminine lens to explore why these films appeal to an audience. So telling us what they're going to do. And then finally, the purpose of the presentation is to examine the plots of characters, etc. So you can see these are 2 very different examples, but they've got all those components there. Next one, please, Alish. And I do see some questions coming through the chat. Thanks, Alish, for grabbing them. We will have time for questions at the end, so please put them in and we can address them. So results and findings. If you have results or outcomes or conclusions, what are they? But don't worry if you don't have them. Some of you might still be doing work in progress, or you're exploring a problem, or in fact, you might have a topic that doesn't necessarily have results and findings in the same way. It's an exploration of an idea or a theory or an expansion of something, okay? So if you don't have results in this way or outcomes, outline what you think you might come to at this stage, because you might still be doing this research. You can outline sort of what you think this might be leading up to, okay? A proposed idea for it, if that's appropriate. Next. Oh, it did go. Okay, sorry. It looked the same for me for a second. It was delayed. So again, why does it matter? We've seen that in some of the examples. So you might want to show that there's research gaps somewhere in your abstract. You saw that where they said, you know, my topic, but the research out there doesn't necessarily address this particular aspect of my topic. How are you adding to the discussion out there? Again, we do recognize, just to be clear, this is an undergraduate conference, okay? We're not expecting the contribution to knowledge that you get at PhD level and beyond. We know that what you're doing is you're adding to the discussion. So again, if you have results, what do they mean for your problem and for your field? Are there any real world applications of what you're doing? And once again, if you don't have the results, you can talk about why the research is important and show where it connects to the wider field. So you're going to write your abstract now. We've given you some good examples and guidance here, but you also might want to go look at previous abstracts from previous BCUR conferences. There's a link here on the screen. You can also Google BCUR and it'll show up. We also, I think, on our website for the conference have links to Let's Talk About X after also, and there's a huge range of things that you can do there as well. You want to make a plan, use the questions on the previous slide as a guide to how you can parse out your abstract, and then not only draft, but redraft it. The editorial space is where you really tighten things up and make something that's really, really, clear and concise and easy to read. You've only got 250 words, so that's an important point. Okay, next. So when you're doing that editorial process and you're refining your abstract, these are the things you want to think about. Make sure that there's logical flow in your argument, that things come together easily. Cut any non-essential information in, particularly cut anything where you're starting to infringe on what your presentation is. You want to give enough to entice the reviewer, these are the reviewers of the abstracts, to understand what your presentation about and kind of want to know more about what is going to be happening, but not give everything away. Aim for concise writing. That word limit's really important. Avoid too much jargon. Avoid too many words that maybe a reviewer from outside your discipline might not fully understand. What does every single sentence, think about what every single sentence adds to your abstract. Does it provide clarity? Does it explain what you're going to talk about, why you're talking about it, what your approach is? And definitely consider getting feedback from one of your lecturers or a critical friend. Swap these things around. Let somebody else read it, particularly someone outside your discipline. They should be able to read it and understand what this paper is going to be about. Next. So this is the final bit. I think we're getting there. So you'll need to register to Oxford Abstracts, the website. And that website there's a link on our BCUR website that says Oxford Online Portal, or there's a button. And when you do this, you will need to register to submit. The form itself is really straightforward. We went through some of what's going to be asked, but go ahead and, register with it like early ahead of time. So you're not like scrambling at the last minute to do it. Hopefully you won't be anyway, but you might as well give it a click and go on and register with it. The deadline is way in January, although it's not really that far away. The 9th of January, just before midnight, okay? And then after submission, as we've said before, you will get an email notifying you that it went through. So maybe try to plan to make sure to submit it at least 11 p.m. So you get that email and you know for sure it's happened. And then there's a review period, and then outcomes and further instructions will be sent out to everyone. These are going to be reviewed by people who work here at the University of Glasgow, both staff members and researchers, and we're very, very excited to see. There's lots of spaces in the conference available. So we, anticipate that lots and lots of you will be able to come and attend. But we look forward to reading some really interesting and well-written abstracts.